Baruchat habaot, ladies, and welcome to another edition of our weekly Torah classes. And if you're logging on to Torah Anytime or to ohelsarah.com, or if you're a YouTube subscriber, or for those who joined us here live, thank you so much for tuning in so religiously every single week in fortification of your neshama. And for following and tuning in and all your questions and comments every single week devotingly. We give you a bracha that your limud, your learning should be elevated, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give you tremendous yeshu'ah, tremendous bracha. Before we begin, I want to dedicate the class to a few individuals. First and foremost, today in Eretz Yisrael, it was Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance, where we remember and we memorialize all the soldiers who gave up their life in order to protect the Jewish people living in Eretz Yisrael. So, first of all, it should be Leilui Nishmat, every single Chayal who placed his life on the line and unfortunately lost his life for the benefit of the life of others. That's number one. Number two, Leilui Nishmat Yehudit Bat Sarah, a former student of mine who used to come to the shiurim all the time, and whose fellow friends donated some money, Leilui Nishmata. Thank you to Judith Walden for the donation concerning my birthday that you made. My birthday was in January, but you made the donation recently. Thank you so much, I appreciate it. Two, Chava Banks, I think your name is out there. You wrote a comment on YouTube regarding a shiur that I gave, which was titled, "The Bear That Destroys Malchut Edom." Unfortunately, when I hit the reply button, there must be something wrong on your end that it doesn't allow me to reply to you. So just know that I've tried to reply to you quite a number of times, but to no avail. So if you want to get the answer to your question about the shiur, please email me instead at info@ohelsarah.com, and I'll be happy to reply to the question that you asked concerning that shiur. Next. The shiur is also dedicated for the success, bracha, and the blessings for Nadine Carmel and Naomi Kirsten and Diane Bat Jolina, I think, for their success, health, and Parnasa. It was donated by Nathan Alcantara. Also, thank you to Naomi Taft, who donated Leilui Nishmat, her father, Faivel Ben Yaakov, Alav Shalom, also be an Leilui Neshama for him, and all those relatives, her relatives in Shamayim, as well as a refuah shlema to Yaakov Ishai Ben Naami. Thank you to Christian McNichol for all the donations that you made for Shvi'i Shel Pesach, as well as Lisa Rubin, you made that donation, and you took the extra time also to donate for all the singles out there who need a shidduch. Kadosh Baruch Hu should bless all our donors with tremendous health, success, and all the good in the world. Let us begin. Yes?
Also on Yom HaZikaron for the victims of terrorism in Israel.
Oh. So thank you for pointing that out. Yom HaZikaron is also in memory of all the victims who lost their lives as a result of terrorism. We hope that any inspiration that's wrought from this shiur should be an Ilui Neshama for them as well. The Chafetz Chaim Alav Shalom wrote in his Sfarim that in the messianic process, Am Yisrael is at the stage of what he calls Chevlei Mashiach, the birth pangs of Mashiach. When a woman gives birth, the most difficult part of the labor is the birth pangs, the contractions right before the baby is born. We are in that stage of the most difficult part of the Galut, right before the Geula is born to the world. So today, we're going to discuss the great suffering that takes place prior to the coming of Mashiach. The question is, Why would something meant to be so wonderful, something we're all working on, which is to correct the original sin of Adam Rishon and Gan Eden, so that we could finally return to the good and peaceful days of old, why following such a long and intense galut does the Geulah, does the redemption have to come with so much suffering? Now, of course, we still need a tikkun. Obviously, there are still rectifications that have to be wrought in the world, but why does it have to come with that much pain and misery? When we look at the world, we can't believe we're in the situation we're in today. Our community and the entirety of Am Yisrael is in a very dangerous place. First of all, so many of the tzaddikim, of the righteous leaders of old, have passed on from this world, and they've passed on one after the next. The words of the Chachamim are coming to life in that right before the coming of Mashiach, there will be no leaders left to guide the people, and will feel helpless, lost, and without direction. Why is this happening? Sometimes, in order to understand the present, we have to return to the past, to the starting point of it all. So we're going to go back to the beginning of the Torah Hagdosha. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning of God creating the heavens and the earth, ve'haaretz hayta tohu vavohu, and the earth was astonishingly desolate. Ve'choshech al penei tehom, and there was darkness upon the face of the deep. The world was in a state of tohu, vavohu, v'choshech, and tehom. These are four descriptions of the world's state before HaKadosh Baruch Hu began to create and to organize. So Chachamim revealed to us that these four descriptions of chaos, desolation, darkness, and the abyss represent the four galuyot, the four exiles. Tohu, Chachamim say, Zu galut Bavel. Chaos represents the Babylonian exile. Vavohu, Zu galut Paras umadai. The desolation corresponds to the Persian exile. V'choshech, the darkness, Zu galut Yavan. That represents the Greek exile. And Penei Tehom, the face of the deep, Zu galut Edom. That represents our current exile of Edom. That's Esav. Our current exile reflects the Tehom, the great abyss, because the Tehom is very deep. The exile, this specific exile, is the longest of all the four exiles that Am Yisrael had to endure. So from the beginning of creation, from Bereshit, we already knew that there's going to be a destiny for the Jewish people, and the reason for that is Bereshit bara Elokim. What does that mean? Rashi HaKadosh Alav HaShalom states these words. Bereshit means Bishvil HaTorah shenikret Reshit Darko. God created the world for the sake of the Torah, which is called the beginning of His way. Not only that, Rashi says, Ubishvil Yisrael, and He also created the world for the sake of Israel, Shenikreu Reshit Tevuato. Klal Yisrael is considered the first of His grain. The world was created so that the nation of Israel should be formed and accept Hashem's Torah. But after we're told, Bereshit bara Elokim, that for the sake of Torah and the Jewish people accepting the Torah in this world, the world was created. the subsequent pasuk in Bereshit informs us that this nation is going to have to endure 4 different exiles throughout the history of the world. V'ha'aretz hayta tohu v'vohu v'choshech al pnei tehom. Now, among the exiles listed, Galut Mitzrayim is absent. What happened to Mitzrayim? After all, Egypt was the original Galut. Why is it not counted among the other exiles that are mentioned? So the Ari HaKadosh Alav Shalom explains that it doesn't have to be mentioned because Galut Mitzrayim is actually the Ima Galut, the mother exile that gives birth to 4 successive exiles. The 4 Galuyot, Galut Bavel, Galut Paras Umadai, Galut Yavan, and Edom, are the future children of the original Galut called what? Mitzrayim. So in order to understand the Galut in general, says the Ari, you have to go back to the original Galut. You have to go back to the root. You have to understand the Galut Mitzrayim. And not only do we need to understand the Galut, but we need to understand the idea of Geula, of redemption. That means we also need to analyze Yetziat Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt. Mitzrayim is the mother, the blueprint, the prototype of all future exiles, but Mitzrayim is also the model for all future redemptions. So let's start at the beginning. You with me? Go. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this world, He also created a basic but important principle, a law. This law is just as important as the law of gravity. This law is just as part of the nature of this world as any other natural law. What's the law that HaKadosh Baruch Hu set into motion? The principle is the law called Midah Keneged Midah, the law of measure for measure. It's a principle that states that HaKadosh Baruch Hu mirrors our behavior step by step. Whatever we do, He does exactly, measure for measure, like a boomerang effect. Midah Keneged Midah is a law. It's a reality that exists in this world, and it's something that David HaMelech Alav Shalom states in Sefer Tehillim. He says, Hashem Shomrecha, God is your guardian. Hashem Tzilcha, God is your shadow. Al Yad Yeminecha, He is by your right hand. God is literally a person's shadow. He shadows our actions. Just as a shadow reproduces every move I make, so too with Hashem. He replicates our deeds, whether good or not good, to the T, measure for measure. So, for example, if you're truly merciful in the eyes of Hashem, He will respond to you with genuine mercy. If you were not truly merciful, He's going to respond to you in the manner that you behaved. This is a law. It's a principle that the entire world is based on, and this is a key to be able to invigorate and bring about incredible rachamim into your life from Shamayim. Meaning, if you want rachamim from Hashem, if you want to end some kind of suffering, you hold the key to ending the grief, because there's a principle of midah keneged midah. If you're merciful, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will show you mercy. If you're hospitable and truly kind, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will return that hospitality and kindness. If you're generous and charitable, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will enact His generosity and His charity upon you when you need it in your life. So you could basically jumpstart the law of midah keneged midah by searching for an opportunity for somebody out there to display kindness and mercy upon. Someone who truly needs it. And that will, in effect, trigger mercy from Shamayim that will be dispatched into this world and onto you at a time that you require it most. But the point is that we're all searching for various gulot, and we do tefillot, and we all want to do good deeds that we could engage in that will alleviate the difficulty and challenges of life. How many of us say, what segula could I do? I got to get rid of this, or I want this to happen. So here we are learning a secret that's been revealed to us by the Ari Kadosh that can yield great results. The secret is whatever you do comes back to you measure for measure. HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes your shadow in everything you do and everything you say, and more than that, everything that you are. Now I want you to notice David HaMelech's words over here. He says, Al yad yaminecha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is at your right hand. The right side is always the side of rachamim, of mercy. So when we engage in a merciful act, HaKadosh Baruch Hu extends His merciful hand, yad yamin, towards us. So now that we understand this principle, we could learn the great revelation of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh Alam HaShalom. There's a pasuk in Sefer Devarim that states, V'natan lecha rachamim, and Hashem will grant you mercy, V'richamcha, and He will be merciful with you. Those words sound a little redundant. V'natan lecha rachamim, and God will give you mercy, V'richamcha, and He will be merciful with you. Doesn't that sound like He's saying the same thing twice? Obviously, if Hashem grants you mercy, He'll be merciful with you. So why does the pasuk reiterate the same idea twice? So the Or HaChaim reveals an amazing yesod. He writes that there are many times that a person is in desperate need of mercy. He's going through challenging and difficult moments in his life, and he's in dire need of divine mercy. The problem is that either he doesn't deserve it, even though we think we do, or there are mekatragim. Maybe there are prosecuting angels in Shamayim that are speaking out against him, persuading Hashem not to grant him mercy. These are the words of the Or HaChaim. So what does Hashem do? He gives that person a test, a nisayon. He creates a situation that offers that person an opportunity to show rachamim, to show mercy to someone else in need. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu waits to see how he's going to respond. If he extends himself and shows mercy to someone else, HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns to the malachim, to the angels, and he says, listen, I understand your position, but look down and see. This person just acted with great mercy towards someone else in need of mercy. And I did create the world based on the principle of midah keneged midah. So now I must enforce that principle and be his shadow. I have to be his right hand. I have to extend my rachamim towards him, even if you claim he doesn't deserve it. Says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. Notice the words in the pasuk of Sefer Devarim. V'natan lecha rachamim. And God will grant you mercy, meaning God is going to give you an opportunity for rahmanut, a chance to display compassion upon somebody else. If you're able to extend yourself with mercy towards somebody else, what happens? The next part of the pasuk, V'richamcha Hashem. Then Hashem will extend His mercy upon you. That's why the pasuk mentions rachamim, mercy, twice. Wow. For example, Rena, I'm going to use you as our example. Imagine you're in desperate need of a livelihood and you're not doing well financially. All of a sudden there's a knock at the door. There's a person standing there collecting charity for his own family. At that moment, the natural response might be, I'm so sorry, but I'm also not doing very well financially. I myself am going through a very rough patch. I would love to help you, sir, but I myself am suffering. I can't help you. I'm sorry. And then you close the door. Or worse. You know who it is that's standing at the door. And you ignore the bell, pretending you're not home. A couple of people are laughing, so I guess they're familiar with this scenario. And by the way, or worse than that, Chachamim say, what could be worse than ignoring somebody who needs your mercy at the door? You know, it could be worse than pretending that you're not home, that you make it obvious that you're not answering the door. He knows you're not answering the door, and you force that person to walk away. That's worse. When the person knows you're not answering on purpose, he says, oh my God. But if that's the route you took, you just lost the biggest opportunity that would have brought you a tremendous yeshuah, an enormous salvation. After all, says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, why do you think that person even came knocking at your door? Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu deliver that person, as we say, door to door service? Did he not do it to give you the opportunity to display mercy? You know why he did that, Hashem? Because he wants to be merciful towards you. But he needs to see that you're responding with the mercy that someone else needs from you. Hashem says, look, I created a world based on midah keneged midah. I shadow your deeds. If you're truly merciful to the one who needs your mercy, I will extend mercy upon you. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to provide you with parnasah. He wants to give you sustenance. He wants to bring down from Shamayim the shefa, the abundance to your life. He wants to grant you mercy. But he must first see that you are genuinely a merciful person. Because Hashem is the one who sent someone to knock on your door as an opportunity for you to grant some rahmanut towards that specific person who needs it. There's a tikkun going on over here. He sent that person so that your merciful act will untie his hands against who? Against the mekatragim, against the prosecutors, so that he could finally help you and pull you out of the difficulty that you find yourself in. So every time somebody asks you for mercy, rachamim bevakasha, directly or indirectly, you have to stop for a moment and ask, am I doing that person a favor? Or is Hashem sending him in order to open up the heavens for me so that he can extend his favor upon me? You hear? Who's really helping who? Says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, the next time someone reaches out to you for some kind of favor, the next time somebody asks you for any kind of help, the next time somebody calls you to resolve a difficult matter, and they want to do it with grace and mercy, and that's why they're calling you, remember the words of the Pasuk in Sefer Devarim, V'natan lecha rachamim. This is Hashem giving you an opportunity to show mercy. Why? V'richamcha. In order to display mercy upon you. Yes.
I have a question. Is it mercy? It might be an act of mercy, but if your intention is that you want to, like, it's not that altruistic. So is it still considered mercy if you're really doing it because you're like, okay, well, I'm going to give to this person at the door because I need Hashem to give to me?
That's not completely lishma.
Exactly.
Correct.
So, like,
but it's still something.
Knowing that that's the reality, like, it's an equation.
It's an equation.
Connected Mida is an equation. Like, is it something that, like, we should aspire to not have that as our mindset?
Well, obviously, it shouldn't be the mindset, because everything that we do concerning mitzvot really should be elevated to the degree of doing things for the sake of the act itself, because there's something HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to learn from this.
Right.
More than the mitzvah is helping the other person, the mitzvah is helping us in a way that we're learning that schar mitzvah, that's lishma. Meaning, what am I getting out of it? Another opportunity to do good in the world. That is when you're rewarded most. When the attitude is, I'm not doing this because I want God now to send me some buck or two. That's why I'm putting my hand into my pocket and giving it. It's not because I want God to now alleviate my financial stress. I'm doing this because this is the right thing to do, because God commanded it, and it's building inside of me a great sensitivity towards others and the ability to be merciful.
Correct. So is
Ultimately,
it a danger to, like, teach us that, I don't mean you, but for us to learn that that this happens, like that this Mida can happen also, this Mida Keneged Mida, where, because then, like, when you're doing it, like, it's much harder now, like when we just are said, okay, you do everything L'Shem Shemayim for the sake of the mitzvah because you want to do what's right, and like, but then when we say, oh, and by the way, you'll also get, it's hard to take that out of your head once you hear it.
You're talking about the rule of Midah Keneged Midah, and how you're being told, if you're merciful, Hashem will act with mercy. So, let me look for somebody to, exactly. But this is exactly the Or HaChaim's point. The ultimate mercy you can show upon someone is true mercy. True mercy comes from that altruistic place, right, where you want to be merciful for the sake of being merciful. But that's the point. That you get to that level of understanding that there is such a thing as midah keneged midah, which means if you have, that's why the key words here that I kept saying is, if you're truly merciful, if you're genuinely sincere, then what did I say? I said, and then Hashem will genuinely be merciful towards you.
What if it's your own family? I mean, if you're merciful to your children, you're not thinking about the benefit you're going to get from Shema. You're thinking about the children. But I'm also benefiting.
But that is also Lishma.
It's still Lishma, even though they're my children?
Yeah, why not? And by the way, we're all Hashem's children. That mercy has to extend itself beyond the parameters of the Daled Amot of the home. Because Kol Israel, what do we call ourselves? Bet Israel, it's a bait. We're all under the roof of the house called Israel. But I want you to understand that we see this idea, by the way, exhibited through the events of the Egyptian exile, as well as the events of the Geulah, Exodus from Egypt. What happened? Remember that Egypt was the mother of all Galuyot, the prototype also of the future exiles and redemptions. And if we study what occurred in Egypt, we're going to find the key to the other exiles and redemptions. So let's learn an amazing idea from the Or HaChaim HaKadosh and apply it to what took place in Egypt. After being in the spiritual corruption of Egypt for 210 years, Am Yisrael sunk to the 49th level of Tumah, to the 49th level of spiritual contamination, which was one step away from the point of no return. If they would have sunk to the 50th level of Tumah, Am Yisrael would have been lost for eternity. So we see that in Egypt, things had become worse before they became better. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu was looking down from Shamayim and wanted to create a salvation despite the 49th level of Tumah that the people declined to. How's he going to do it? How do you save an entire nation that deteriorated to such a deep level of spiritual contamination? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a situation in Egypt that generated so much Jewish mercy that he'd have no other choice but to respond in life and then redeem us. What happened? Well, at this point in the story of Egypt, Bnei Israel were in a miserable galut, slaving away from morning to night, experiencing the most dreadful horrors. This was a most bitter slavery. The Egyptians forced the Jews to labor from dawn to dusk under the taskmaster's whip. It came to a point where Bnei Israel just couldn't take it anymore. That's when Moshe Rabbeinu, alav shalom, the Moshiach, was dispatched to Egypt by Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu confronted Paro, demanding that he free the people. We all know the story. Paro began playing games. Mi Hashem asher eshma bekolah. Who's this God that I should obey? I never heard of your God. Well, I don't see his name in my list of my list of gods in my book over here. Now, we would expect that Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader who's going to redeem Bnei Israel and take them out of Egypt, would leave Paro's palace, and what would happen the minute he steps foot out of the palace? The entire palace would collapse with Paro and all his advisors in it. But no, that's not what happened. The opposite took place. Instead of things getting better, things became worse. Paro told his Egyptian taskmasters, up until now, we've been providing the Jews with straw in order to produce the mortar for the bricks. But no more. Not only will they have to work the same hours and complete their usual tasks, not only are we going to demand the same productivity from dawn to dusk, but we're going to add to their labor by commanding them to collect their own straw in order to make the bricks. Now, his own taskmasters were telling him, Paro, that's impossible. We're already pushing the slaves beyond their abilities. If we demand that they provide their own straw and make their own bricks and still produce the same quota of bricks, that would be physically impossible. Paro says, I don't care. I'm going to show Moshe who I am. I'm going to teach him what I could do to the Jews if he stirs up a rebellion. So I'm going to make the lives of the slaves more bitter than before. Of course, Bnei Israel fell short on their daily quota of bricks because it was physically impossible for them to have such a workload and make bricks at the same time. And what does the pasuk state in Sefer Shemot? Vayuku shotrei bnei Israel asher samu alehem nokshei Paro. And the officers of the children of Israel, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had appointed over them, were beaten. Lemor, and the Egyptian taskmaster said to them, to the Jewish officers, Madua lo chilitem chokchem lilbon kitmol shilshom? Why haven't you not completed your quota to make bricks like the day before and like yesterday? The Egyptians appointed Jewish overseers that were in charge of the Jewish slaves, and they monitored their work. These Jewish officers stood up and they told the Egyptian taskmasters, please, we beg you, don't beat our brothers. They're already exerting themselves, working for you from dawn to dusk. If you beat them now because they didn't fill their quota, they're going to die. Instead, punish us. We'll take the beatings on their behalf. And they took the beatings. Because of the rachamim that these Jewish officers displayed on behalf of their already beaten brothers, they brought the rachamim down from Shamayim upon the nation. They brought so much mercy upon Am Yisrael. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw this, he said, because of what you did, the Shotrei Bnei Israel, the officers of the nation, you will now have the merit to one day in the future become the Zekenim, the elders who will lead the people in the desert when they take them out of Egypt. Because you displayed mercy towards your brothers in Egypt and you took the beatings instead of them, I'm going to display the greatest mercy upon you. I'm going to redeem the entire nation with a redemption that up until now was not deserving. Despite the 49th level of Tumah that the nation declined to, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was able to show them rachamim because of a few Jews who were merciful to those in need of mercy. V'natan lecha rachamim. Hashem is always trying to offer opportunities for us to show mercy so that He can be merciful towards us. Midah keneged midah. The mercy generated in Egypt, which was a true mercy, was able to bring about the great mercy of the redemption of the Geulah from Mitzrayim. You know what that means, Michal? It means that there are times where life becomes darker for a reason. Things are more difficult for a reason. Life becomes more challenging in order to bring about a huge redemption. Sometimes life can become unbearable, and that places you in a position where your back is to the wall and you don't know what else to do. You just don't know what else to do. And when Hashem places you in such a situation, it's in order to bring out the best in you and to bring out the best in one another. Where we're suddenly able to reach deep within ourselves and offer compassion to another person. Suddenly we're able to offer so much mercy to someone else who's in a great deal of pain. Such acts are worthy of redemption and salvation, and that's something we're all waiting for. Rabbi Yonatan Eibshitz, alav shalom, wrote something brilliant about the Jewish compassion displayed in Egypt. He asks, why was it? It's actually, before I tell, it's actually, when I read this, I'm like, wow, this, I don't even know whoever's reading this is an amazing chidush over here. He asks, why is it that from all the tribes among Bnei Yisrael, Paro did not demand that Shevet Levi engage in slave labor? Why was the tribe of Levi exempt from slavery? What was it about Shevet Levi that made Paro excuse them from the intense work? Now, there are many answers that are offered by the Chachamim, but Rav Yonasan says something incredible. It's incredible. He says that Paro already knew from his stargazers that the Jewish Mashiach will descend from the tribe of Levi. And because of that, he says, he exempted them from slave labor. Ma kesher. I mean, why? What's the connection over here? And he says like this. It's such a brilliant chidush. He says, because when you're in the tar pits of slavery, when you're being whipped and you're working so hard and it's so challenging and it's so dark, it gets to a point where you just can't take it anymore. And that distress and that utter exasperation might just cause you to get up and do something about it, to take action. He says there are times that frustration and pain can become a great motivation, to the extent, he says, that great heroes and leaders can be produced from pain and misery. And those leaders might have the power and the incentive to lead a rebellion that can turn the world's superpower upside down. Paro knew that. So he said, if the Mashiach of the Jewish people will be born from the tribe of Levi, I don't want to create any motivation for him to rise up against me. So I'm going to make it very comfortable for that tribe. They're not going to feel the pain and the anguish of the galut. They're not going to feel the whip of the taskmasters on their backs. And in that way, they're not going to have the motivation to come out of the galut or fight full force against me. Rav Yonasan Eibshitz. Whoa! This chidush should, I don't know, hit you like a ton of bricks. Paro allowed Shevet Levi to sit and learn Torah all day long in the Bet Midrash. By the way, Rav Yonasan Eibshitz points out that Chachamim say even subsidize their learning, so they'd be so comfortable in the galut that they're not going to feel the pain of the galut enough to actually do something about it. They won't want to fight back against the galut. They won't have the motivation to leave the galut. Does this sound familiar? Because life is much too comfortable. Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. And that teaches us that the entire purpose of the slavery, the bitterness and the pain, was in order to motivate Am Yisrael to get up and fight against this galut. It was to encourage them to finally say, "No, enough is enough, die." It was in order to urge Bnei Yisrael to have rachamim on each other and to develop within themselves heroic forces so that HaKadosh Baruch Hu also can create a national salvation, measure for measure. Now we understand why it becomes darker before daybreak. It gets darker for a reason. It gets worse before it gets better. But we also understand now why the era before the coming of Mashiach is compared to the birth pangs of a woman in labor. A woman knows that the pain of labor always intensifies to such an extent that it brings out in her such a koach, such a strength and a drive. It creates in her an unexplainable energy to be able to deliver the best that she possesses inside of her. So what does a woman do? A woman will push herself and gives it everything she's got. She pushes forth and through the pain in order to do what? In order to give birth to life. That's the way Mashiach comes. It becomes very difficult and dark before the calm and the light. Sometimes our suffering generates redemptive acts of mercy that bring about the salvation. The Zohar Kadosh says that if in Shamayim there's a judgment on a person, lo alenu, if there's chas v'shalom a gezerah, a harsh decree sanctioned against someone, Hashem is going to offer that person a lifeline, a way to get out of that gezerah. What does he do? He sends that person a situation, an opportunity for that person to be merciful in order so that Hashem should be merciful with him, so that the gezerah can finally be done away with. How does that work exactly? Says Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, alav shalom. He answers this question by highlighting a famous Gemara of Berachot that discusses a hasid, a pious man. It was Erev Rosh Hashanah, and he hears a knock at his door. The hasid answers the door, Rina, that was the example I gave you, answered the door, and he saw a poor man standing there. Now that year there was a famine in the land, and money was scarce. But this hasid reached into his pocket, and he offered the poor man a generous sum of charity. When the hasid's wife saw what he did, oh boy, what did she make a fuss? She started yelling at him, "Are you crazy? What did you do? We're in the midst of a famine. Nobody has anything to eat. Nobody has money. We might not be as poor as the man, but we don't have extra. Why did you give him so much tzedakah?" The Gemara says she lay into him so badly that night, the night of Rosh Hashanah, the Hasid didn't want to come home. He ended up sleeping outside the local cemetery. Imagine that. He says that was the only place he could find some peace and quiet, in the Bet Kvarot, Bet Achayim. And there, in that cemetery, in the middle of the night, the Gemara says he began to hear two spirits talking to one another. One spirit said to the other, don't get any ideas now to go to, to the cemetery and lay there at night and see if there's a bemet, these things happen. Please don't. One spirit said to the other, I just heard an announcement in Shamayim that this coming year, anybody who plants wheat in the first trimester of the harvesting season, their entire crop is going to get wiped out. And anyone who plants in the second trimester will become extremely wealthy, because that will be where the bounty crop will emanate from the second trimester. The Hasid was listening to this and he says, oh wow, I was just offered a huge secret. He woke up in the morning with this incredible knowledge. Interesting, no? Interesting, Haman. The Gemara presents this story. The Gemara tells us, why are we telling you this story? To demonstrate that the spirits in the next world, they do have some limited knowledge of what takes place, both in this world and the next. They're aware. There are certain things that the neshamot are aware of and are privy to, whether it's concerning future or present events. But anyhow, this hasid thought, instead of planting in the first trimester, I'm going to plant in the second trimester. And he did. And he became incredibly wealthy. Nice story? Yes or no? So far, so good. So Rabbi Yisrael Salanta comments on this Gemara and he wonders. He says, this is such an interesting story. The Gemara is telling us about a man who gave tzedakah to a poor person on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and then he was berated by his wife in the most horrible of ways. That night he ends up sleeping in the cemetery, and he heard the souls speaking to one another, and that's how he became rich. He says, what's going on here? All the Gemara really wanted to tell us was that spirits in the next world do, to some extent, know what goes on in this world. So why did the Gemara have to tell us this entire story about how it was Erev Rosh Hashanah, and how the hasid had financial difficulties, and that a poor man knocked on his door, and that despite financial hardship, the hasid gave him a large donation, and because of that, his wife tore into him, and he ended up sleeping in the cemetery? What do we need to know all this for? Couldn't the Gemara just tell us there was once a hasid who slept outside a cemetery and he heard two spirits talking about what would happen with the harvesting season that year, and that's that? Did the Gemara have to tell us this entire story? Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says that this story teaches us something profound. You see, that day was Judgment Day. It was Erev Rosh Hashanah. The judgment was beginning to descend upon the world. And in Shamayim, certain decisions were beginning to be drawn. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided, for whatever reason, that this hasid was going to lose everything that he had that coming year. He was supposed to be from those who plants his seeds in the first trimester and lose everything. His crops, his home, whatever little bit of money he had left. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu had mercy on him. And he said, I'm going to give him a chance to save himself from this harsh gezerah of this coming year. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He sent him this ani, this poor man, to see what he would do. Would he withhold his money because he's not in the best financial situation? If yes, then midah keneged midah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would also have the right to withhold his sustenance. Or worse. But if the hasid extends himself and shows mercy to the ani, despite the fact that he too is suffering financially, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will extend his mercy to him, although he may not be fully worthy. And that's exactly what the hasid did. He gave the poor man a generous amount of charity, despite his own hardship, because he truly had mercy on this poor man. That was the moment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu announced, now I can be merciful towards him. You with me? But there's more. After the poor man went away, and the hasid closed the door to his house, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent him another test, another opportunity. What happened? The hasid's wife started yelling at him, berating him, insulted him for having extended himself to the poor man. And because of the downpour of insults, it caused this hasid to do something so drastic as to go to sleep outside a cemetery. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says that the hasid went to sleep outside the cemetery because he thought about it, and he says, when you think about the day of judgment, the day of mitah, the day of death, it helps put life into proper perspective. Suddenly, the real priorities of life stand out and everything else is not so important. So this hasid chose not to get angry with his wife, and instead he went to sleep outside a cemetery in order to remind himself of the Yom HaMitah, the day of death. The Yom Adin. Hashem offered him a second opportunity when he sent his annoyed wife his way. Now, truthfully, he could have gotten angry. But if he wouldn't get angry, if he passed the Nisayon, a great reward awaited him. And sure enough, the hasid passed both tests. What was the result of the story? Because there was a gzera on him to lose everything that year, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him 2 opportunities to save himself, and he passed both tests. That's why, as he lay outside the cemetery, HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed him to hear the conversation that took place between those 2 spirits. That conversation offered him an inside tip that would turn him into an incredibly wealthy man. So Rabbi Yisrael Salanta says, notice what happened over here. This hasid was about to lose everything that year. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent him 2 opportunities in order to provide a ge'ulah, a redemption. And because the hasid passed the tests, the gzera, the harsh decree in Shamayim, was rescinded. And instead of a great loss, the man acquired a remarkable gain that alleviated all of his misery. Says Rabbi Yisrael, look what happens when we extend ourselves in a moment of a great nisayon. This hasid offered a poor man charity even though he himself was lacking. What was Hashem's response to that? Hashem tzilcha al yad yaminecha. Hashem became the hasid's shadow and responded towards him with mercy. Not only did the hasid not lose everything that year, HaKadosh Baruch Hu provided him with tremendous wealth. So Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says there's a great secret behind this story, which is really the yesod that the Or HaChaim wrote about. This story, he says, explains why in life things appear dark before the light shines through. This is why things become more difficult before the Yeshua, before the salvation is granted. You know what that means? In our generation, we are being shown, be'etzem, a great sign from above. We've lost so many of our zakenim, of our former leaders of previous generations. So many people, Rahmana Litzlan, are passing away. The entire world shut down for 2 years during the Corona period, never to be the same again. The world has not gone back to normalcy since then. People went out of business and haven't yet recovered. Children are veering off the path of Torah. Parents are themselves in dire need of spiritual elevation. The parents themselves, unfortunately, many of them are running after vanity and materialism. Wokeism and the leftist extreme agenda is reversing the creation. What's going on over here? How did this world and life become so dark so fast? From all of this, what do we learn? If we go back to the mother of all galuyot and the mother of all future redemptions, we see that things needed to get more difficult in order for the good to eventually emerge. What does our history prove? What does our history prove? What's the consolation that the Torah Kedosha is offering us? We're being told, whenever we're placed in a really difficult situation, it forces us to generate tremendous mercy upon others. Think about it. How many of us are extending ourselves towards others, even though we ourselves are not in the best position of life? How many of us give tzedakah despite our own financial hardship? How many of us are answering the door to those in need of mercy rather than ignoring the knock? How many people put themselves in harm's way in order to help somebody else in need? These are the people who take the beatings, so to speak, for the sake of Am Yisrael. So many of us are extending ourselves beyond our limits in acts of great mercy towards one another. A lot of mercy is being generated despite the challenges that we face. This incredible outpouring of random hasadim is certain to create a midah keneged midah, a boomerang effect from way from Shamayim that will shadow our acts of kindness, and that mercy will bring about the redemption just as it did in Egypt. So we've been put in a situation that's so dark, but it's generating heroes of mercy and compassion that forces Hashem to have mercy and compassion in return and to release the Geulah into the world. I just want to conclude with a chidush from the Ramchal, alav shalom, who wrote something incredible in his Sefer Ma'amarei Geulah, Chelek Bet over there. He writes that there's going to come a time where something remarkable is going to take place. And he quotes a midrash in Parashat Bechukotai that quotes actually the words that Shlomo HaMelech alav shalom wrote in Shir HaShirim. What are the words? Hinei ze omed achar kotlenu. Behold, God stands behind our wall. Mashgiach min hachalonot, overseeing from the window. Metzitz min hacharakim, Hashem peers from the cracks. Says the Midrash on these words of Shlomo HaMelech. Chalonot, what are these windows that Shlomo HaMelech is referring to? And they write, Elu batei knesiyot ubatei midrashot. These are the shuls and the study halls. What does a synagogue have to do with a chalon, on a window? Incidentally, by the way, Rav Ovadia Yosef alav shalom wrote in the Sifrei Halacha, it's very interesting, that a shul must have windows. You cannot have a shul without a window, and he said preferably should have 12 windows. I'm not going to get into the reason of why 12, but I want to know why. Why do we have to have windows? What's the connection between the shul and the windows that it's actually referred to by Shlomo as chalonot? The Ramchal teaches us an amazing chidush, and with this we will end. He writes that when the Bet HaMikdash stood, there was an incredibly huge light, an or gadol that came down from Shamayim, that illuminated, that shined upon the Bet HaMikdash. And as long as the Bet HaMikdash stood, that great and holy light of shefa and beracha, of abundance and blessing, of simcha and briyut, of happiness and health, was dispatched from the Bet HaMikdash to spread out to the entire world. So the Bet HaMikdash was actually the beacon that received and then transmitted that holy and enormous blessing of light that came down from Shamayim and spread to the entire world. But because we sinned, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent the enemies as punishment, and once they destroyed the Bet HaMikdash, the sha'ar, the heavenly gate that was once opened to allow that incredible light of bracha to come down, that sha'ar, that gate, was now, what? Closed. Once that sha'ar was closed, darkness descended upon the world. What kind of darkness? Am Yisrael went into the fourth and final galut, and into a period of great hester panim, a period of great spiritual concealment. But the Ramchal revealed to us that although the gate of that great light that once shone down upon the Bet HaMikdash is closed because the temple was destroyed, there are still a few small windows, a few tiny cracks in the gate that allow for a little light to continue to shine through to the world. He writes, it's a very fine ray of spiritual light that spreads out from the little windows, from the halonot and the harakim, to the entire world. And those small beams of light, they enter the batei knesiot and batei midrashot. They enter the shuls and they enter the study halls. Says the Ramchal, that's why the shuls and the batei midrashot are referred to as halonot, as windows, because they represent the great light of what once was, which is the Bet HaMikdash. That's why we call a shul a mikdash me'at, a miniature temple, because it's a tiny remnant, he says, of that light that the Bet HaMikdash used to spread to the entire world. And now, without a Bet Mikdash, the mikdash me'at, that small remnant of what once was, which are the shuls and the study halls now, they receive that small ray of light and it spreads to the rest of the world. Listen to the words of the Ramchal, what he writes. Vehinei hachalonot ha'elu. These windows will one day be opened until the time of Geula. Venimtza, and we find, ksheyagia zman ha'geula, that when the time of redemption nears, yatchil hashar leithorer lehipateach. That heavenly gate is going to slowly begin opening again in order to dispatch the real ray of light for the third Bet HaMikdash that will be built again in this world. But he explains that when that time of the sha'ar slowly opening up will take place, hachalonot yehiyu holchim umistalkim. Those windows will first need to be sealed in order to create a large opening of light so that the third Bet HaMikdash can actually come down from Shamayim and Hashem's kingdom can begin to manifest in the world. The Ramchal writes, that's the secret behind the concept written in the Gemara of Yoma, of what? En malchut nogaat bechaverta afilu kimlo nima. That means one kingdom cannot overlap the next, not even by a hair's breadth. So the time will come where the Geula will be imminent, and that original shar that used to transmit the light during the times of the Bet HaMikdash will be in the process of opening. But before it does, the small windows have to close first. And what are the windows? Elu batei knesiot ubatei midrashot. First, all the shuls and all the study halls have to close, so that after that huge shar in Shamayim can reopen to allow the descending of the Bet HaMikdash into this world. Why am I telling you this? Never in the history of our people, not even during the times of the Holocaust, not during the times of the Crusades or the Inquisition, was there ever a time that the Batei Knesiot and Batei Midrashot, that the shuls and the study halls were closed around the entire world like they were during the Corona period just 2 years ago. You know what that means? When we all thought that this was such a terrible time period and we couldn't believe the shuls are closed, the schools are closed, the Batei Midashot were closed, the closing of all the shuls and study halls. Perhaps they're divrei nevuah, a kind of prophecy that was made by the Ramchal 250 years ago that actually came to life. The Ramchal was teaching that we're going to be in a very dark situation, specifically because an opportunity is being presented to us by Hashem in order to create a divine mercy that will end with the redemption. And boy, was there a stream of good deeds and mercy that Am Yisrael was displaying towards one another during that entire time period. We couldn't stop being merciful towards one another. Whatever you could imagine during that Corona period, we did. Therefore, the Gemara of Sanhedrin tells us of many times in history when the time of the Ketz, the time of redemption had come, and there was an et ratzon, there was such a fortuitous time in the Shamayim to help bring the Mashiach, but it was up to the generation to do something to facilitate the Geula. And the Gemara says, sadly, we failed. So right now, there's such a great opportunity in these difficult times to bring the Mashiach. The question is, what are we going to do about it? We could either be swayed and pulled into the Tehom, into the dark abyss, or use this time period as an opportunity to bring out the light and the goodness that exists in each and every single one of us. We've been given many occasions to do good, to be merciful, to act with rachamim so that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should respond in kind and finally bring the Mashiach. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu continues to show us signs, plenty of signs that the Geulah is near. And we have the opportunity to grab hold of those precious simanim and respond to them. And in so doing, we create a global redemption for the entire world with the coming of Mashiach and the spreading of the Or HaGadol, the dissemination of that light that will restore the Kedusha, restore the holiness and the glory of Hashem's Malchut. Amen Ken B'Yiratzon.